Now, there's callers on the line there. There's Jacob from New York City. I'll see if he's there. Is Jacob there?
Hey, Alan, how you doing today?
Not too bad. Yeah.
Listen, my question is, there's so much with the occult as far as, like the EU building being the rebuilt Tower of Babel. And, it seems to me that, I don't think there's reptilian aliens or anything, man.
Yeah.
But there does seem to be some sort of overarching doctrine or overarching religion belief.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? I mean, what are they drawing all the inspiration from?
Well, it's easy to get inspiration when you're selected at university as a bright young man who will serve them very well and paid handsomely, and you're guaranteed the doors will just open for you, which they do. So greed is a good factor for recruitment, but however, there's definitely a religion behind this. It's very old, and we can go back into ancient Rome, and we can even find traces of it there with their initiation ceremonies, with the equestrian order and so on, and they're very much, they copied almost the same system, or either that or one copied the other, but it was very similar to the Jewish celebrations or even systems when they had the tent traveling in the desert idea. The Romans did the same thing with equestrian order. They set up a big massive tent, no roof on it, and they had their lit flame and so on, and that's where they initiated their new members. But this was going on across the ancient world, even in Greece as well. So there was a brotherhood already existing in the ancient times who were incredibly wealthy, and we can find traces of it through the philosophers who belonged to these groups, because they talked about the differences between the poor and the rich, the aristocracy and the rest of the public. And some of them even then, like Plato, tried to rationalize the fact that some children could pick up on mathematics very quickly or geometry and so on, because he believed, he says, that he and the elite had lived before. Now, there was a form of reincarnation, very much linked to Hinduism. And the ones who couldn't grasp it well hadn't been born before, so they were a lesser type of being. It was a form of religious classism, where racism, where they classed you according to had you been born before or not, and that was their evident truth, because they believed that they knew because of a previous life or whatever. And this was very popular, this idea, all right up through the brotherhoods that existed, through the very rich men who came up through the Middle Ages. You find it breaking out again in Rosicrucianism when it first broke out to the general public in France. Same idea. They claimed not only had the riches and could make you wealthy if you served them well, but they would give you life extension because they knew sciences. And that's still used today, by the way, in high circles. Yeah, and you will get life extension. You will be someone like Kissinger or a Brzezinski or a Maurice Strong, and even Rockefeller himself trotting across the world when you're in your 90s giving lectures. They don't get arthritis, they don't get old age problems, they don't go senile. There's something else given to them. So you're absolutely right. But hold on, we'll get back on that when I come back from this break. Hi folks, we're back, cutting through the matrix and talking to Jacob from New York City. Are you still there, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm still here. Now, when I see these guys up there in, like Bohemian Grove, and they're doing all, the roads and the fire and the out. Yeah. What religion is that? What book are they reading from, man?
You'll find traces of that again in ancient Greece. You'll find it in ancient Rome. You'll find it even in the accompanying literature for ancient Judaism. Because even in Judaism they claimed that the staff that Moses raised in the valley of the serpents for wisdom, the brotherhood of serpents means wisdom. Those in the Gnostic, high Gnostic, and that was their symbol. And they brought that back, they claimed, and eventually into the Holy Land and planted it in a grove, and the high elders would meet there with the Levites every year. But eventually they claimed that when the Romans invaded, they destroyed the grove. So these are, you'll find this in pretty well all the ancient world. The ancient world was not separate, you know. They had commerce and trade and intellectuals traveling back and forth, and builders and all the rest of it. So there was a system, much like today's system, of commerce, wealth, lots of wealth, and trading in slaves, and even depopulation programs, even programs where they moved whole populations after war out of their land, a very common occurrence, and put them elsewhere. Still going on today. Generally, they emigrate now out of the countries we're bombing into the countries that are bombing them. So it's really the same techniques, but they've gone down through the ages under many names, and the underground stream was one system they called underground stream. That was the gaining of knowledge, keeping of knowledge, never to be shared with the profane. And the knowledge really was chemistry and other sciences. And they said in the Middle Ages, they said that eventually our power will reach that of kings and queens and governments, because they'll come to us for their weaponry. And you might call it a military-industrial complex too. But today they brought all their symbology down into the modern sciences as well, especially medicine, etc., with the serpents and so on, the caduceus, showing there quite simply. And even the computers too. Apple is from the tree of knowledge, you know. That's why.
You know, if I knew what they knew, and I was seeing like, you know, with NASA, and they have like the Apollo space program or whatever. Yeah. I mean, you know, if I'm one of those elite guys, do I, you know what it's all about, even without, you know, knowing what it's all about, just through names and symbols and things like that?
Yeah. Oh, they know what it means. They're very careful how they choose them. Of course they are, because they mean elements of the structure of power, or arms of power. And each arm of power is given a particular name. So they use the ancient deities for their speciality, much the same again as if you find in demonology. In the Kabbalah, for instance, you'll find certain fallen angels had specific purposes so you would call them down if you wanted to use them. And it's still done by some sects today. It's the same thing when they use Apollo. And Apollo, again, his symbol was the serpent, as it was Diana's too. And so they use these terms all the time. Even NASA is an old Aramaic word, meaning the head. So the head or the leader, NASA. And that's why they like NASA. And then even the NSA, if you speak the NSA, it's NASA. It's a similar thing. So they're very careful on how they use these terms and give them names. They've always used the same names all down through history. Again, the profane speak them, but they don't know what it means. They think they know what it means, but they don't really. So what they're really telling you is these terms, when they're used for projects, are theirs. They're in charge of it. It's their project, even though you'll be paying for it.
So they have like their own secret language and whatnot.
It's mainly, actually what it is a compilation of occult terms and terminologies, coupled in a very clever way with say, philosophy, or some of the ancient writers of the day that wrote plays even. So they'll add things in and use these terms in amongst them, and they all understand quite ably what they're talking about, because they get a classical education. Yeah.
Okay, and my last question, and I'll be done with you. The skull and bones, man. I mean, what's the root of all that?
The skull and the bones. Well, the skull has always been used, right, even from the ancient to the modern times in the high cults and the high lodges. It's always been used as a reminder of your own mortality. Because when you join these things, it's not just there to make you aggrandized for yourself. It's also, and they will aggrandize you. They'll get you honors and all the rest of it. But it's not just to fill your pockets. You've got a mission to accomplish. And the mission will be the specialty area they put you into. And that's your mission. So you're a knight on a quest, and the skull represents, as I say, the basic reminder of your own mortality. That's all through Shakespeare as well. And you'll find that symbol all across the whole of Europe. And the crossed bones, again, is a symbol of, it's actually on different levels it's given different meanings. And this is what they always do from the lower disciple to the higher one. And the lower ones, they'll always tell you that on one hand is crossed. A cross means it's barred. You're barred from entry unless you understand the passwords, the meanings, and so on. On the other hand, it means that which carries you. Don't forget that which carries you. What carries you is the temples. It's a Jachin and Boaz crossed together. You see? The left path, the right path working together. And that also was the symbol of the Priori de Zion, which the Pope gave the charter to, that became the Knights Templar. And that became their flag for their ships at sea. And that's why it was used as a pirate flag, because they became the pirates eventually when they were tossed out of France. And they plundered all the other ships. So it's still used today. You'll see it all over temples and places in Europe and Britain especially. You'll see the skull and bones, not just in graveyards, but you'll see it on buildings as a sign of where the brothers would meet, you know.
And is the Pope really supposed to be like a fish guy? Like, what's his name? Dogon? Dogon?
Yeah, Dogon was one name for them. There's a couple of names for them. They copied it from India, actually. But you can understand that they talk about nature. And if you go back into ancient Egypt, you'll find that the Egyptians said that Ra, Almighty Ra, the God that was behind all gods, and they talk about this today too, there's a God behind all gods, meaning their God, the one that runs everything. The lower entity that you worship here is basically the Lord of the world, a lower entity. The Greeks were very good at explaining it. He was called the Demiurgos. Anyway, the Egyptians said that the fish, the fish was a symbol of life and superior life, virility. And of course the Nile was even called Happy, and with a god called Happy, because all things came from the water of life. They banked the river and they owned the water, and it nourished them, fed them, and gave them life. But the fish was a symbol of it too. And they've got a lot of old stories of a guy walking out the water. That's all nonsense and stuff. The reality is the fish was a symbol of fertility, with the mouth open to get the water of life, which rained down upon the high priest, or even a pharaoh who sometimes wore it too, because the water of life was literally the semen actually coming down as rain. That's what they called it. It was the life from the God was the water coming down to fertilize the land and give life to everything, life symbolized by the fish. And so the mouth is open for it. And even today we use that term when they take oaths to the Queen and they sing the anthem, long will she reign over us. Reign is literally, they put a slight spelling difference to throw you off. That's what a spell is, it's to throw you off. But it's the same term. She reigns over you. All the gods' hierarchies rain down on you and over you. So it's a very ancient system that folk don't even know what they're looking at. And if you look for it, I never watched the royal wedding, but it took place in Westminster again, just like the Queen was coronated in. I saw the coronation on old reruns. And what you're seeing there is a reenactment of even a system they used in ancient Egypt, and even the system of Nimrod. Nimrod was a guy who wore the mottled fur around his neck. It was white with black spots, like the royalties do today. And he sat too on a raised dais, a sort of form of pyramid. And everybody that you'll see around that throne is standing in the same positions you'll see carved in the old steles of ancient Egypt and elsewhere in the Middle East. So you're watching and you wonder what on earth is that. They're doing this in England. What's that got to do with the English? It's got nothing to do with the English. So this is a very secretive society. Everything must be done properly. They don't make it up on the spot. You'll stand here with this big scepter and you'll hand it to so-and-so. This is all from ancient books. And you're watching the dominance of an ancient system still work through, take over the world today. Yeah.
All right. Well, I won't take any more of your time. Cheers, mate. Keep up the good work, then.
Thanks for calling. And we've got Anthony from New York City as well, if Anthony's there.
Oh, yes. Hello. This is
Hello.
Anthony.
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks a lot, Alan. I had you spoke about population reduction today in the program, and I just had a question about the Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah.
And apparently they have 10 laws. All of each are written in English, Swahili, Spanish, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, Chinese, and Russian. And you also spoke about with the previous caller about the ancient orders. They also have some languages here also in Babylonian, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Ancient Egyptian.
Yeah.
Did those ancient orders speak those languages, and did they have their secret brotherhood in those time periods and in those cultures? And could you just expound upon the 10 laws here? That seems like a mockery of the 10 Commandments on the Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah. They've always used their own ancient languages in the very high orders amongst themselves. That because obviously even if someone could spy on you, which is, there's obviously no hope of doing with the security that they have, but they have, in case anybody did, they wouldn't know what they were talking about, basically. But it's also a symbol of all of the ancient brotherhoods coming together, because they were all of one brotherhood in ancient times. It doesn't matter what language they spoke. So they'd have high lodges in every city-state, which were actually countries in those days. And so they came down through the ages. They actually were scattered at one point, thousands of years ago. They admit that themselves. There's psalms that were taken out of the Old Testament for Christians, which are still available in the Jewish text, where it talks about them and how they had their own particular ceremonies. They went underground, meaning inside caves or down under the earth for these ceremonies. And they had these forms of orgies, the kind that you saw in one of the Matrix movies, where they're going to have this kind of strange dance, a very, very paganistic sexual dance. That was all symbolic of that ancient system. Anyway, it says eventually that they wanted to, they pushed so far, taking over countries and peoples and so on. The people rebelled when they found out what they're up to. They give Nimrod as an example, and they hunted them down all over the deserts. Wherever they found them, they killed them. And when they started up again, these guys obviously used the same old passwords and symbols and handshakes and waves and winks and nods and so on, and the way they stand with their feet. Even Isaiah talks about it in one verse, where they stand and wink, you know. And so you'll find that they've come down through time, rebuilding that which was lost, as they claim. And what was lost was a complete domination of an ancient world, all trade, all banking, all armies, all everything, where most of the people were being turned into slaves in all their city-states. That was how they ran Greece. That's how they ran Rome. That's how they're running the world. People don't realize that they're just wage slaves. And now you don't need a slave master to throw a rag at you or a pair of sandals once in a while. You buy it yourself with a little you're left over. So we're not as poor as those ancient ones, but we're getting to that stage. We will get to that stage by the time we're done. And they plan the future, as they say. They represent the gods, the God of the world. The God of the world blesses you in all your endeavors. You want power, fame, fortune, you join the brotherhood, and they'll make sure that you get it if you serve them in a certain direction. So he's a demiurgos, as they say, the bad-tempered God, the one who can be nice at 1 minute, bad the next. So again, he's got the two hands, he's got the olive branch, and he's got the symbol of the arrows in the other. That's the symbol of Manasseh as well, and a long history to Manasseh, who they claim was the descendants of Joseph, not the other tribes. And that's why they use the Egyptian symbology so much in the US, for instance. That's why Rothschild has that on his crest as well. So it's a long, long story. But if you go into the history of ephod, an ephod as well, it was an eye. It could also be called a basket, but it was also an eye in ancient Hebrew and Aramaic. And you'll find the verse in Isaiah where you talk about those that be careful of those who wink and stand with their feet squared basically together, as they do in the military in Britain, for instance. And that's why they call it square bashing too, in that way you stand at attention. Aten was the god at that time. So it's interesting. It all ties together. It can't be refuted. And yet it's nothing you can take into a court of law, because the law is also their system, the legal system is theirs too. And they're recreating that which they lost, which is their total dominance over the world, to run the world the way that they themselves, being high intellectuals as they believe they are, have the right to rule it. And they use democracy as a front, which is such a joke, because we have no rights at all in democracy.
Can you go into the Georgia Guidestones and explain what is the reason for those 10 laws, and who put that there? And
well, we know that a Mason definitely put it there, or Rosicrucian, and even the name that was given supposedly on the county records of the guy who purchased that little bit of land there and so on was again, I think, Christian Rosenkreuz used from the Rosy Cross, So that's that's obviously Masonic. The true Rosy Cross, there's two in the US. One's a fake, one's a real one. But they do believe the same things I've just been telling you, that the super intelligent have the rights, those who are rich and powerful, and who have not married out of lust, but allowed the priests to match them up with the proper women of the right qualities. And that's very important. In fact, the gene often comes through the female lineage, not the male. But they say that they want to reduce the population down to the manageable level that they wanted in ancient times, and recreate the ancient times where they would live high on the hog in their big marble cities, and the few peasants will simply farm the land. That's what they claim. But I'll speak a bit more when I come back from this break on that. Hi folks, we're back cutting through the matrix, talking to Anthony from New York, who's talking about the Georgia Guidestones, and there's no doubt about it. They've been defaced already by folk who've woken up and rather object to the fact that these guys want to kill them off, and quite rightly so. But the 10 laws again go back to very ancient times. On the one hand, it's a symbol of hermaphroditic systems or power, left brain, right brain, all the rest of it, male, female. The one is the male, and of course they don't like females too much, except for the gene they carry and their ability to reproduce from their own sperm, obviously. And so it's also, it's 0 is the female. And if you read it backwards too, it's from 10, it's the net. They love the word net. They've got lots to do with net and Poseidon and so on. So they've given a lot of symbology there for their own ones to read. And I think most of these guidestones stand on 4 pillars or so. That's traditional at least. And the 4 pillars are 4 squared. That means perfected. The perfect ashlar basically is 4 squared, and all Masons are said to be ashlars. They become perfectly squared on all sides. In other words, so they're not just normal anymore, normal and ignorant or profane, like a rolling stone, right? They become squared and perfected by the system and the lodge. And that's what that means too. All those who've been perfected will survive. The other ones will be destroyed by what they call the law of nature, and the fittest should go on. But you'll find this traditionally through all, if you know how to read Freemasonic writing, you'll find it through all their talks. They're very seductive, by the way. All these books are written with two systems combined into one. One's exoteric, one's esoteric. The exoteric can tend to put you to sleep. The esoteric, if you keep awake, you'll see the thread of what they're actually saying, but almost between the lines, as they guide your mind, and it captures some people and they become willing recruits. So when you read their stuff, you have to be awfully, awfully careful and not to be trapped by it, because they use a lot of truths and then combine it with their very careful spin that they've worked out over thousands of years to be very successful, and then you're gone. You'll be one of theirs, on a low level, obviously, because you won't have the right genealogy. So these guys all claim to be at least a 3rd generation of perfect breeding. That means their wives were picked for them. The son goes higher than the father. The grandson goes even higher. He can start off at a very high degree at a much younger age and taught. He's the perfect one that they're after, the 3rd generation of perfect breeding. So it's a very, very old system. It's in your face, of course. Jacques Cousteau and all these guys, the guys who loved nature and wanted to kill off the public, all belong to the same organization. And as I say, each branch of it is a specialized branch in its own area. And so you have Rosicrucianism, you have General Freemasonry, you have, again, look to see what parallel it's on. It's very important. They love the 33rd degree as well. And you'll see that's where they dropped the bomb on Japan, was in the 33rd degree parallel. They love that one so much for the 33rd degree, because that's where the sun goes down, you see, and rises on the 30th and then sets on the 33rd. So they give you these stories of your lumen period, and you have to achieve lots of things by the time you're 30 to at least 33. For the lower Masons, they can get their 32nd degree and a little badge and a little gold watch to wear and all that stuff. But that's the lower Masonry. They're the lower lodge, as Albert Pike called them, the lesser lodge. They're basically a front, as most people in religions are a front for a higher system and don't know it. Scottish Rite of Freemasonry is not Scottish. You speak it. You've got Seraphim. Seraphim is the higher order of angels. That's it for tonight, folks. From Hamish myself from Ontario, Canada, it's good night to me. Your God or your gods go with you. And so on, and that's where they initiated their new members. But this was going on across the ancient world, even in Greece as well. So there was a brother who'd already existing in the ancient times who were incredibly wealthy. And we can find traces of it through the philosophers who belong to these groups, because they talked about the differences between the poor and the rich, the aristocracy and the rest of the public. And some of them even then, like Plato, tried to rationalize the fact that some children could pick up on mathematics very quickly, or geometry and so on, because he believed, he says, that he and the elite had lived before. Now, there was a form of reincarnation, very much linked to Hinduism. And the ones who couldn't grasp it well hadn't been born before, so they were a lesser type of being. It was a form of religious classism, where or racism, where they classed you according to had you been born before or not, and that was their evident truth, because they believed that they knew because of a previous life or whatever. And this was very popular, this idea, all right up through the brotherhoods that existed, through the very rich men who came up through the Middle Ages. You find it breaking out again in Rosicrucianism when it first broke out to the general public in France. Same idea. They claimed that not only had the riches and could make you wealthy if you served them well, but they would give you life extension because they knew sciences. And that's still used today, by the way, in high circles. Yeah, and you will get life extension. You will be someone like Kissinger or a Brzezinski or a Maurice Strong, and even Rockefeller himself, trotting across the world when you're in your 90s, giving lectures. They don't get arthritis, they don't get old age problems, they don't go senile. There's something else given to them. So you're absolutely right. But hold on, we'll get back on that when I come back from this break. Hi folks, we're back, cutting through the matrix and talking to Jacob from New York City. Are you still there, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm still here. Now, when I see these guys up there in, like Bohemian Grove, and they're doing all, the roads and the fire and the out.
Yeah.
What?
Them very well and paid handsomely, and you're guaranteed the doors will just open for you, which they do. So greed is a good factor for recruitment, and but however, there's definitely a religion behind this. It's very old, and we can go back into ancient Rome, and we can even find traces of it there with their initiation ceremonies, with the equestrian order and so on. And they're very much, they copied almost the same system, or either that or one copied the other, but it was very similar to the Jewish celebrations or even systems when they had the tent traveling in the desert idea. The Romans did the same thing with equestrian order. They set up a big massive tent, no roof on it, and they had their lit flame. Now there's callers on the line there. There's Jacob from New York City. I'll see if he's there. Is Jacob there?
Hey Alan, how you doing today?
Not too bad. Yeah.
Listen, my question is, there's so much with the occult as far as, like the EU building being the rebuilt Tower of Babel. And, it seems to me that, I don't think there's reptilian aliens or anything, man.
Yeah.
But there does seem to be some sort of overarching doctrine or overarching religion belief.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? I mean, what are they drawing all the inspiration?
Well, it's easy to get inspiration when you're selected at university as a bright young man who will serve